Tsar surprised me a bit later. I was expecting him to be at TAFE. He said his class had been cancelled, but he had work to do at home anyway. Some sort of graphic design project. He loves that sort of thing. It was great to see him feeling positive. I think the Avanza's working. And I had to spoil everything, of course, because Tsar happened to ask why I was at home and I spilled the beans. What do you mean we can't see Dan again? You can't keep pulling that shit, Juss. So the guy's married. He's left her, hasn't he? I mean, he's here, she's on the other side of the fucking country. Can't get more separated than that in Australia, now can you? He lied to me, and he's been pretending that he's not. He's squatting in Picklejig's house, for God's sake, telling people he's Picklejig, or Picklejig's nephew, I don't know. Big fucking deal. It's not like he's trashing the place. You don't get it, do you? Nothing about him is real. He's fake from start to finish, like those knock-off jeans and the other clothes he has in his cupboard. Right down to the reverse text. We should have seen it a mile off. How do you know he hasn't led you up the garden path? Maybe he knows nothing about sound engineering. He knows enough. We've already seen the results. I can't believe you're so easily duped. He's using what little he knows to pull the wool over your eyes. Why? Think just, why? What would be the fucking point? To get to me. Don't flatter yourself. He might like you, but we also happen to be mates. You know, friends, something you don't have. Now you're just being hurtful. I can't believe what you just said, I really can't. And I can't believe how you've just gone ballistic on the guy. Okay, he's married. Maybe he didn't tell us everything. That doesn't mean he's another Ian. You're just getting paranoid. Did you even ask him for an explanation? No, but he did say his wife didn't know he was here. Again, big fucking deal. So he ran away from some bitch, so what? I can't believe I'm hearing this. Tell you what I can't believe. I can't believe you just fucked us over before we were about to submit our EP. I'll tell you something else, sis. Nothing's going to stop me from getting that sorted. And while I'm at it, I'm going to get Dan's side of the story. Something you obviously haven't bothered to do. He had about 3 weeks to tell us his side of the story. That's plenty of time, don't you think? Depends on when you start counting. He's not going to tell some complete strangers. Oh yeah, by the way, my wife's a psycho and I've buggered off because I can't stand seeing her face anymore. And I'm a bit short for cash because she's taken everything. So I'm going to stay at this house, which I know is empty. You're priceless. It doesn't bother you at all that he's living in someone's house and using his stuff. Someone he probably hasn't even met. Why assume that? I mean, he knew the password to open the studio, didn't he? You should have seen the password. It was fucking long. For God's sake, stop swearing. It might have been novel when you were 15, but now it's just puerile. I'm sorry if my language affects your majesty. He got it at the same time as he got the key, from the house that belonged to his uncle in Perth, the one that now also belongs to Picklejig. He was annoyed at being left out of the will, so he's taking what he can while he can. Let's assume you're right. I couldn't give a stuff. His uncle sounds like he should have left him something. But anyway, you're wrong. He knew how to find that studio. It was hidden. You saw it. He knew how to open the door and he knew how to operate the equipment. How would a simple squatter know all that shit? And why would he bother? Probably described in some plans somewhere. Sure, all very convenient. You hide something like a sound studio in a laundry cupboard, and you leave behind a trail of keys, passwords and instructions, so that a complete stranger can come in and operate it all, just in case he needs to record some music. Occam's razor, buddy. There isn't any other explanation. He didn't know Picklejig 2 months ago. He pretended to Mrs. Chu that he was Picklejig, or at least that he was related to him. But he never mentioned that man to us, ever. What on earth makes you think he has permission to use the studio? Never mind the house. Well, for one thing, how about the README files on the studio computer, the ones addressed to him by name? The one that gave us specific information about using some of the software. You heard me. Silvio the Snoop showed them to me when Dan was in the studio talking to Seb and Bart about their reggae bits and pieces. Yeah, didn't know that before you chucked your psycho, did you? With that, Tsar stomped off to his room and slammed the door. I have to admit that Tsar got me thinking. Mostly because I really want him to be right. It's funny how the little things sticking in your mind can affect how you feel. For example, I remember that Sunday night after the recording session. Dan had busied himself in the kitchen, cooking. To be honest, I was sulking, sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, not saying a word. I was livid with Tsar for disobeying me, and he was chuckling away in the corner. He's still a big kid, and he knows how to get under my skin. Dan, on the other hand, was totally absorbed, chopping vegetables, putting on the pasta, all that. The little thing I remember is this, how Dan kept the tea towel draped over his shoulder. It's not as if he was using it. Basically, I suspect he just forgot to hang it back on the oven door where we keep it. I'm not sure why that should stick in my memory. I guess there was something inherently homey about it. It reminded me of Dad, using a nappy on his shoulder to soak up Tsar's baby vomit. The other thing is, Dan seemed totally comfortable, so I started to feel comfortable. I remember wanting to continue to sulk, but not being able to anymore. He even started humming to himself quietly, eyes focused in the middle distance, running over to stir things occasionally, totally wrapped up in what he was doing. I think I've worked out that the clumsy Danny Kaye persona wasn't what attracted me. I liked a little bit of vulnerability, that's true. After Ian, it was a breath of fresh air. But in the end, I'm like Tsar, really. I don't have time for someone who vacillates, panics, or is needy. I'm too busy carrying my own weight to pull someone else's. Either they add value or they don't. Life is just too short, nasty, and brutish as it is. If that sounds self-centered, it isn't. I'm more than happy to make it a two-way street. In fact, I insist. But I'm 37 now, and I just don't have the time or energy to be continually propping someone up. I have enough drama with my little brother. I suppose this is all a long-winded way of saying Dan didn't seem to need propping up. I realized early on that he was only clumsy because he was around me. The fact that I discomforted him gave me a bit of a buzz. I hate to say it, but it made me feel empowered. Wanted would probably be another better word for it in this case, because you don't care if you have that sort of effect on someone unless you want them to want you. At least that's true for me. Otherwise he seemed totally self-sufficient, self-contained, organized. The image of Dan with that stupid tea towel on his shoulder represents this. I so wanted that representation to be real, not just a projection of what I want. On the other hand, experience intrudes. I can't help but feel that Tsar's implicit trust in Dan is just a more naive version of my own wishful thinking. Tsar is only 20. He hasn't been burned nearly as much as I have. Self-help books always praise optimism, but cynicism wouldn't correlate with age if it weren't so damn instructive. Tsar didn't say a word to me for the rest of the afternoon. He emerged from that pigsty he calls a bedroom, walked right past me out of the door, got into his car and drove off. To where, I don't know. I'm hoping it wasn't to Dan's. Actually, I lie. Part of me is hoping it was. I know I didn't really get Dan's side of the story, and I'm secretly hoping Tsar does. I wouldn't go so far as to say that I have any apprehension of a different outcome. It's just that a small part of me remains wishful. Like I said earlier, we had a good thing going, all of us. It would be great if it weren't all smashed up. I'm afraid it is, well and truly. But it would be great if it weren't. I followed Tsar out to the driveway. I thought he might pause when he saw me walking out, but he didn't. He didn't bother even to look back. He was too busy reversing his car, then grimly focusing on the road as he pulled away. I saw him switch on his headlights. Twilight had set in. Like most 20-year-olds, he lives his life assuming that the world revolves around him, that he's at the brink of international stardom and critical acclaim. He was organizing his big break with the record company when his histrionic sister came along and spoiled it all. Right now he's as pissed off with me as he can get. I'm hoping it doesn't cause him to slide back into depression. But then again, these things are out of my control. I'm not the one who invented a life and lied to everyone. I was about to go back into the house when who should come walking up the driveway but Ian. Tsar must have been so focused on ignoring me and getting away that he didn't see Ian's car farther up the road, where he has to go when Mrs. Lazarov's car is parked in our narrow street. Ian was smirking as he approached me. This time he wasn't carrying any flowers or pastries. I considered running back behind the screen door and locking it, but thought that would have appeared hysterical and weak. Right then I needed to appear strong. Ian can smell weakness from a mile away. He hones in on it and destroys the host, just for the fun of it, if nothing else. I crossed my arms as he approached. I imagine I looked petulant. He kept on smirking and staring straight at me. I've noticed something about Ian. He never blinks, ever. He makes eye contact and doesn't let go. I was talking earlier about discomfiture. Well, Ian is the master. Here was someone who, in the early days, managed to turn me into a nervous schoolgirl again. Well, not really. I'm too practiced in the art of deception to let it show, but I felt it internally. Here's the thing. When someone like Ian locks his eyes onto you, you feel like you're the only person in the room. It's disquieting and flattering at the same time. But in the end, it's not about flattery. It's not about making you feel special. It's about dominating you. Ian lives to dominate others, and his whole staring unblinkingly with a smile is part of his game plan, a big part. I doubt he does it consciously. It's just something that works for him, and so he sticks with it. You ran off early? I wasn't feeling well. What's the doctor's diagnosis? Eating too much humble pie? Go to hell, Ian. Now, there's no need to be nasty. He'd walked up to me by then, standing only a foot away, staring. I didn't want to give an inch. What are you doing here? Came by to see if you were okay. Life can deal us some disappointments. It hurts to know when you've been wronged. It hurts even more to admit that you were wrong. Oh, and I suppose you would know about that. Ha ha ha! Ian laughed. As always, his eyes didn't. No, can't say I do. But I sit and watch the never-ending parade of losers pass by every day. You're like Charlie Sheen, always winning. Yep, that's me. He reached out and grabbed my arms. I let them go floppy. I wasn't going to fight him, but I sure as hell wasn't going to cooperate. Please let go of me. Ah, don't be like that, baby. He tried to pull me in closer, but I wouldn't go, so he closed the gap himself. He started to lean in, and I closed my eyes and turned my face away. I could feel his breath and then his lips on my cheek. I could smell alcohol, a cigar, 5 o'clock stubble, an older man's ketone breath. I find it hard to imagine what I found attractive before. I would like you to leave. And what if I don't? He was starting to kiss my neck and nibble at my ear. Are you going to call your knight in shining armour? Tsar will be back in a minute. He was starting to feel like a lizard against me. Your brother, he continued, kissing my neck, has driven off to go somewhere, and we both know he doesn't duck down to the shops. He won't be back for ages. I'll scream. Better save that for when we get inside. Shut up, Ian. I shook my hands and pulled away abruptly. It worked because Ian wasn't expecting it. Ho ho! So that's the way it's going to be, is it? Good. I like a bit of rough play. I turned to run for the door, but I should have known better. Ian was much too fast. In fact, he didn't need to do more than grab my hair. I howled in pain, but he held on, pulling me backwards and off balance, wrapping his elbow around my neck at the same time. Then he half walked, half dragged me to the door. You want to go inside, do you? We can arrange that. I tried to scream, but he slid his hand over my mouth, and all that came out was a stifled moan. A quick cuff across my left ear left my head ringing. That'll shut you up, I think. You're hurting me. It'll hurt a lot more if you stuff me around. He pulled me into the corridor, still holding me by the hair, then threw me to the ground. I could hear the screen door slam behind him. Ian didn't bother looking, as he used his heel to shut the front door. He started to undo his belt buckle. Please don't, Ian. I'd raised myself into a sitting position, and I was holding one arm out. He was silhouetted against the lead-light window, through which the twilight still glowed. You don't want to do this. And why not? What are you going to do? Tell on me? A lover's tiff, they'll call it. The word of a whore against that of a distinguished legal practitioner. And do you really want Branko knowing what you used to do? How about James, your PA? And then there's your brother and your dear old grandmother. None of them need to know. And I promise I won't tell them. If you're good. He pulled the belt out of the loops by the buckle as he finished the sentence, emphasizing the good with a snap of the leather. "You'll just have to learn to cooperate like a good little whore. I'll keep my part of the bargain, I promise. I want you to be happy after all." He let his pants drop and then stepped out of them as he walked towards me. "But first we have to establish who is boss, eh?" I tried to scramble to my feet, but Ian was on me like a college wrestler, pinning my arms against the wooden floor. A stray beam of light from the kitchen caught his distant, unfocused eyes. A sneer was pulling at his lips, and he was panting. He used his body weight to pin me to the floor, then used one hand to hike up my skirt and pull down on my knickers. I tried to twist my leg and pull on his arm, but he brushed aside my resistance effortlessly. In the end, I felt the elastic tear and snap, the hem cutting into the inside of my leg. He leaned in to kiss me, and I turned my face away from his stale breath. He grabbed my face roughly, squeezing my cheeks together and forcing a tongue into my mouth. At the same time, he used his knees to wedge the inside of my thighs, pinching the muscle. "Just like old times, eh? You and me," he said, still panting. "That's the way it's going to be from here on." I'd been through this before, but not for a long, long time.